Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 17, The Masters of the Himalayas, from A History of Secret Societies, by Arkon Daraul. Chapter 16, The Masters of the Himalayas. There are people all over the world who believe that in India and Tibet there are communities of master sages. These strange and dedicated men, shunning normal life, have discovered secret and mysterious powers which enable them to communicate telepathically, to send out what is generally called power, to affect the destinies of the world or of individuals. They are, of course, most sympathetically inclined towards those who believe in them and who try to make spiritual contact with them. Reincarnation is one of their tenets, and they alone hold the true secrets of life and death, of the supernatural. They are in contact with the creative and destructive power, and they therefore form the true link between the ordinary man and the immensity of all that is not man. They may even take the form of incarnate gods. We may now visit one of their lamaseries, in that high frozen waste of the remote Pamirs, where Russia, China and India meet, where religion and magic are the preoccupation of more people per square mile than anywhere on Earth. The Pamir people are squat, mongoloid, impassive, and their way of life has changed little since the untamed horsemen of Genghis Khan passed this way 7 centuries ago. For millennia before that, they carried out their ritual practices, which much later were given that overlay of Buddhism which came to its greatest, if unorthodox, flowering in Tibet. They are not, as we have been told, romantic, impressive, powerfully spiritual people who can at will exercise extraordinary powers which leave the mere Westerner gasping. Such things as cameras, binoculars, radio sets, far from being accepted with a superior nod of the head, excite and baffle the monks of Tarshur. And yet, during and after their magical rituals, they distinctly show powers which are inexplicable to the ordinary man. They are, again, conjurers, deceiving people with tricks which involve such illusionist procedures as apparently making plants grow several feet in a few minutes. This penchant of theirs for combining religion with conjuring, their ignorance of the outside world and periods of uncanny prescience, has been responsible for producing the myths about the lamas and the debunking. The truth is much more complex, and one searches in vain among travelers' tales and occultist literature alike for any sign that they have been studied with an open mind. But the facts have not been laid bare. The facts are that they are dedicated to achieving magical power and using it. They are also practiced in deception and use it. Both things, they think, unlike the analytical Westerner, are complementary. Why? Rituals take 2 parts, those which are performed publicly and the ones reserved for the initiates of the secret cult. On Wednesday evening, as the sun goes down over the jagged rocks dominating the valley of Aksoka, the beating of drums announces that the rituals for making sure that the luminary rises tomorrow morning are about to take place. People of all kinds and conditions crowd into the leveled space before the gaunt monastery to watch the dance. Men and women dressed in outlandish garb dominated by immense demonic-looking masks jig up and down to the incessant drumbeat against a background of reed flutes and the clang of gongs. The first part of the ritual has begun. Flaming torches illuminate the scene, carried by young would-be priests in flowing robes, their faces shaven, some of them still innocent of stubble. The atmosphere is already becoming charged with emotion, for the spirit which animates the lamas may soon manifest itself. Suddenly, under a circle of pitch brands held high, a tiny lama steps forward. He takes from the folds of his robe a knife, then another, and a third in quick succession. These he throws at a small statue of the Buddha, which is held up by none other than the Mahatma, chief priest himself, standing on the temple steps. His aim is excellent. Each seems to hit the statue, each falls to the ground. With a shout of triumph, acolytes run forward, pick up the knives and pass them around the crowd. It is immediately seen that the metal has been shivered as if it were glass, and little but the wooden haft is left. A shout goes up. The miracle has been performed. The conjuring trick has shown the power of the Buddha. The meaning of this rite, Organ Lama said as he guided me through the rituals, is to show that the Buddha is inviolate. He can defend himself but does not use violence. I asked him whether the whole thing was not in fact a substitution trick. He paused for a split second. It depends upon what you are looking for. If you see something like this and it seems to be a trick, this means that for you, it is the symbolic nature of the act which matters. If, on the other hand, you believe that the miracle has actually taken place, you can proceed further in your development on the basis of faith. This concept of conjuring was one that I had never heard of, but it seemed to have its own logic, at least from the Lama standpoint. The dancing became frenzied, with dancers and spectators joining in, including some of the 40-odd priests. Half a dozen of the latter, I noticed, did not move, but surveyed the scene with the wary and contented eye of the stage manager when all is going well. Why should it be necessary for followers of the Buddha who believe that absorption into nothingness is the best aim in life to ensure that the sun comes up tomorrow morning? Arkon regarded this as a rather elementary question. The activities of the believers in the doctrine of the Buddha, he said, over the past 2,000 years had caused reality to become less. Reality included things like the sun, everything which we perceive by the senses. Lamas, it was true, had attained or could attain nirvana, the state of nothingness, which is complete contentment and unity with the divine nothingness. But in so doing, they were selfish if they slipped into it and left the rest of the world where it was. So they could not let this millennium, as it were, of nothingness occur until everyone was ready to be absorbed. Hence the need to keep the sun in its place. This at least showed that Buddhists had a sense of responsibility for the community and did not concern themselves with their spiritual welfare alone. I told him so. That is indeed so, and this is why we keep contact with the world at large and seek to steer it on the way which will lead all to nirvana. It was at this point that I recognized the first of many indications that this was the source of the legend of the Himalayan masters. There are masters, he told me, throughout the world. They are in constant contact by telepathy, of course. A part of their activities was this maintaining the status quo of the world. A procession was now moving into the temple, which stood at the foot of the fortress like Lamazari, and we followed. At each step the gongs clanged, and the priests intoned the mystic word of power which I had been told must never be pronounced, such is its physical force. Inside the temple, an aisle led to the immense sitting Buddha statue, at the foot of which offerings and incense were placed. The air was heavy with a sickly odor which seemed to interfere with the clarity of one's thinking. When all had filed before the idol and stood in prayer before it, the procession reformed and started up the long and stony climb to the monastery itself. Here, in a large but low room, sat the chief lama, sitting with his disciples somewhat incongruously upon a number of gilt armchairs. Before them were low tables. A number of bowls were brought, and a mixture of flour and water was handed out, which we ate in silence from our bowls. It was yellowish, not very pleasant, and contained chopped pieces of some vegetable. The Lama spoke to me at some length. A great deal of what he said I did not understand, even through an interpreter. His mystical theories seemed to contradict one another, and when I tried to go into their ramifications, I was met with a polite smile and an assurance that I would understand in due course. I asked him about various people in the West about whom I had heard as Buddhist adepts. He had never heard of them, he said, but politely added that this might be because they were known to him under different names. No, he could not locate them by countries because this was not the way in which things were done. Yes, he was in spiritual communication with people all over the world. No, he did not interest himself in politics. The Dalai Lama was one of the reincarnations of the Buddha. But reincarnation was not a real Buddhist belief. It was a contamination from Hinduism. Was Buddhism as he understood it a secret cult? And was it the same as understood in Tibet proper and by the Dalai Lama and his followers? Yes, why secret? Because it could not yet be understood by the majority of people. The drums were beating again, and one realized that something was happening within me. There was a distortion of the things which I saw, and there seemed to be a huge space of time between my thinking of something and my saying it. I felt distinctly annoyed by the necessity of sitting there, and began to think that if the music was faster, I would like to dance. As if in response to the unspoken wish, the music did get faster, or seemed to do so, but I now found that I could not dance if I wanted to. An Indian had told me when I left Kashmir, "Keep away from those lamas, they hypnotize you." This was the thought which now came into my mind, but I could not hold it there. It came and went. I looked with tremendous effort at my watch. An hour had passed since I had come into the room. I looked at the lamas, and they seemed to be in various states of abstraction. Only the chief man still looked at me unwinking, There was no sense of menace, but a definite feeling that he knew that I was getting out of myself. That reality could not now be counted upon. I looked at a torch burning in a bracket across the room. There was a distortion of its flames and a change in their color, an uncanny brightness about it. My interpreter began to talk again, and I was relieved that he did. He was telling me what the sage was saying, about life, about death, about the mission of man in the world, about the divinity of matter, about the fact that nothing really mattered at all, how a man became released through following the middle way. I felt that this was right, this was true, nothing else mattered, he was right. He said that I should try to project my mind out of the body, and that in this way I would gain things which were really my need until I came to the stage when I needed nothing. This, I thought, was real, true philosophy. I cared nothing for anything else than to sit and listen to that voice, waiting until what it said should be translated to me, waiting with confidence that this was just what I wanted to know. Then I woke up lying on a pile of skins in a cold and drafty cell in the monastery. My throat was dry and I wanted water badly but could not speak. I was still tired but had to have some water. I went out of the cell through innumerable corridors, found that I was below ground. Then I was out in the early morning air, gulping it, looking for the stream which I had seen near the monastery. I drank water greedily. Monks were walking here and there. None took over much notice of me. I wandered back into the lamasery with no idea of where my cell had been. Deciding to go back to the central audience hall, I was just getting to it when I saw, piled up outside, a number of the bowls from which we had eaten the previous night. Adhering to the sides of one or two of them was still some of the yellow paste. On an impulse, I scraped some of it out, wrapped it in my handkerchief, and put the mess in my pocket. I went to say goodbye to the master as soon as I had located the friendly organ, and he kindly told me that I should come back any time as his guest, and that I would now have something to think about, and should think about it a good deal. I did. The analyst's report of the Zamba paste showed that it contained alkaloids of scopolamine, hyoscine, and atropine, all possibly derived from belladonna juice, that the chopped vegetable matter was probably mandrake, which contains scopolamine and other alkaloids which produce hallucinations. It is scopolamine which it is said makes a person malleable and open to suggestion, and both mandrake and belladonna were used in the witches' brews of long ago, when those unfortunates believed, under whose direction is still not known, that they had conversed with the devil, and that they had cursing power, could fly, and the rest. Putting it charitably, there seem very good chemical reasons why the followers of this cult believe that they have the power to contact the minds of others, and even influence events at a distance. Perhaps, like the conjuring, the use of drugs is symbolic, or merely helps to open the psychic eye. The fact that these alkaloids, in the uncertain concentrations in which they occur in wild plants, are highly dangerous to life, indicates that if they were being administered deliberately, the dosage must be extremely finely calculated. On the other hand, they might merely be a part of the local diet, though I never saw them being collected for food. Amateurs, at least, who experimented with them would probably cause death, while severe poisoning would be the least of it. Looking back, one is inclined to think that the monks used this in their food for their own purposes, because they would have had little reason to employ such drugs only upon casual travelers. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.